What's up, squad? This is Brandon from the Bantu Sun. Thank you so much for joining me today. So, I've been doing a lot of digging, trying to prepare some documents and some tools to give to you guys. But the more I'm digging and doing a lot of this research on the ground, I'm coming up with critical material tables, etc. And seeing as the famous ice hockey player Wayne Gretzky say, why are you so good, Wayne, was the question. And he said, because I go to where the puck is going to be, not where the puck is at. So looking at where the puck is going to be in the future of the world, I'm starting to get an eerie feeling that Africa is falling behind. And the reason why, as you can see, with this new America First agenda, there's been a realignment of the world, and it's slowly changing, right? As new alliances are made or old alliances are hardened, and enemies are made aware. So you have a situation where all these countries or regions are out there making deals, doubling down, developing industries, and what has been, I think, very quiet on the front has been Africa, especially the sub-Saharan. You have North Africa, and that is closer to the Mediterranean as well as the East Coast that's close to the Red Sea. Of course, they're naturally going to be on the scene because they're so close to Europe and the Middle East and the Gulf states, etc. So they're always part of the conversation, for better and for worse. Now you have a situation where you have sub-Saharan Africa, and I haven't seen the internal development that I was hoping to see at this stage of the game. Where you have a president that's relatively benign, like most American presidents for the African continent, but exceptionally President Trump, who has really no great interest in the continent of Africa. You're not seeing African leadership step up, and I think the Africa has to change out of this old paradigm. I think there was this old Cold War mentality down there, where there's a zero sum game. And I just haven't seen the leadership arise beyond that. You have so many leaders. When I did a short, if you saw it, on some of the longest serving leaders, a lot of those leaders came from Africa. And that may be the culture. But just because you're an older leader don't mean you can get away with not having new ideas. And the question is, where is this development? Where is Africa going to compete in the future? I was making a model the other day on hotspots, and one of the triggers for a hotspot is rapid population change, right? Because it increases desire for space as well as consumption of resources, because now you're dealing with a lot more demand. And it's two places that this is going to really hit hard. One is South Asia, countries such as Pakistan and India. And the other is going to be primarily sub-Saharan Africa, especially on the eastern rim, such as your Ethiopia, Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, and Nigeria. Nigeria is projected to be 400 million people, I believe, by the end of the century. Nigeria. I don't know if you guys saw those I Show Speeds clips, but Nigeria. This is a place that has its own problems. They tried to move the capital because it was so burdened. It was such a obstacle to manage the capital. They are moving it from Lagos to Abuja. So you have this massive country. It is the African giant demographically speaking, but it's a significant underperformer by all metrics. Like, can you imagine if Nigeria had is right now the population around 220 million or a little bit more than that? But 220 million people, the impact they should have on the world, considering that they really have no real natural threats, but they can't even maintain their own internal security. There's Christians in the north that are being killed. Like, this is a criminal acts, but because Nigeria doesn't have the sovereignty, these they're being victims to American planes bombing on Nigerian land, which is basically unacceptable if you're a serious player in this world. Let's not forget the fundamental premise of all this geopolitical talk, this strategy, personal development, why culture is so important, is because there is really only one game at the end of the day, and that is the acquisition and disbursement of resources. And power is who gets to decide that, right? Who decides who get this loaf of bread? Because we live in a world, as they say, fundamentally in economics, of unlimited wants, um, but limited goods. So you have a situation where there's only so much that the market can bear as far as distribution. And the question is, who decides who gets to eat? And there are very few countries, if any, in sub-Saharan Africa that can say that. This is a cry for help. This is me ringing the alarm. This is very, very scary considering some of the population growth this part of the world is going to see. Right now, you're seeing there's a little mix up going on with Rwanda, as Rwanda kind of has played an intermediary role. So long have the world been comfortable with a backward sub-Saharan Africa that a massive state such as the Congo was being victimized by Rwanda. And many people believe that Rwanda was behind M23, what some consider a terrorist group, some consider liberations fighters operating in the eastern regions of the Congo. But to sustain themselves, like all military operations, they resort to theft. And they've been stealing a lot of resources out of the Congo. Well, I think this is a lot of European roots in this, maybe American roots as well. But nevertheless, President Trump has said, why deal with the intermediary? And President Trump is dealing relationships with Congo directly. But hopefully this benefit the Congolese people greatly. And Congo is a country because it has so many neighbors, and it actually is like the heart of sub-Saharan Africa. Congo is a country that if it developed and it had great leadership, it can give a boon to an entire region. This is a very wealthy part of the world, but it is so underutilized, so underproductive that it's borderline criminal. And when you look at a world where population is no longer seen so much as a benefit, because you're still in with AI and robots, and you're able to multiply every person. And as I say, it's going to be a point where you're going to have wars where two sides are not even going to see each other, right? There's going to be remote wars, or those that can conduct remote wars against people that have to fight the wars on the ground. It's going to be a technological gap. And associated with this technological gap is going to be resource procurement. So if you don't have the technology, you got to have the resources as well. And if you don't have either one of those, or you can't develop your own resources, it's going to be pretty harsh, especially when you're dealing with a large booming population. So I would urge a lot of African leaders to look around them. You have some of the greatest state potentials on the planet in what I believe in southern and southeastern Africa, where you have these amazing countries such as South Africa, Mozambique, Zimbabwe, Zambia, the Congo, these Rwanda, like these countries such as Malawi, one of the most fertile countries you can possibly be, like 90% arability. Like there are some phenomenal opportunities as far as resources and agriculture in this part of the world. And I don't see a free trade block. And that amazes me. I don't see a leader being a promoter or a proponent of a free trade block in this world. Like the fact that if you look at a map and see who are the top trading partners for African countries, every country is going to be outside of Africa. Every once in a while, you get a good trade flow with South Africa, because South Africa is by far the most developed country on the continent for its historical reasons. But this is criminal. Like you look at United States' top trading partner, it's Canada. Canada and Mexico. Now, Mexico, you have a complementary relationship there, of course, but Canada, for all intents and purposes, doesn't really offer anything exceptional to the United States. The population are right on top of the American border. So a lot of goods that the Canadians have, the Americans have. This relationship is purely based on desire to promote unity between neighbors, or historically speaking. You know, it's a different era with President Trump and Prime Minister Carney. But this is the mindset, and the fact that this is not a major driving force and some of the most geostrategically beneficial lands on the African continent, I find to be confusing at least. So it's just an opportunity, but I'm really interested in how this is going to play out. There aren't that many leaders on the African continent. Don't get me wrong, there's some countries that are doing quietly well. Everybody was surprised by the infrastructure that was in Benin. Cote d'Ivoire has pretty good growth rates. Ghana has pretty good growth rates. They don't make a big splash, but these guys are holding serve. But these countries simply aren't big enough. Rwanda, we'll see what happened to that. We'll see what evolves with the Congo. And then you also have a situation in Ethiopia. And that's another thing. Every time you get a leader that's on their business, that's doing what has to be done, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, it just is what it is. Like you have and Abiy Ahmed, he gets a lot of pushback. But Abiy Ahmed is doing what he needs to do. He needs to unify Ethiopia. Now, unfortunately, and why does he need to unify Ethiopia? Because he is going to be experiencing one of those great population booms in his country. And you can't walk around with a bunch of warlords operating within a nation. It fragments the power of the country. It's not right or wrong, it just is. And you have a situation where you have over 100 million people and you don't have access to a coastline. This is a big freaking deal. That means one, you don't have strategical flexibility, and then two, your lifeline could be cut. And add on top of that, right? Number three is this over reliance on, in the case of Ethiopia, these smaller countries, they're going to price hike them. So everything Ethiopia get, it doesn't get fresh off the sea. It goes over land, and there's going to be a tax on it, or unless they work out a advantageous deal. And that's why you see Ethiopia trying to work some. Ethiopia is trying not to go to war, um, basically on their moves, because they could have been went to war with a country such as Eritrea or Somalia, but they're trying not to. And this is where they try to go through the back alley, back door with Somaliland and try to work something out that way. But Turkey came in and kind of squashed that down because Turkey has a lot going on, such as for oil and military weapons sales to Somalia, and they want a unified, strong Somalia. So Turkey's been trying to hamper down. But every time you turn over, Egypt is trying to prod at Ethiopia because Egypt is worried about Ethiopia's influence on the Nile Valley River, which Egypt is highly dependent upon. Like, and you just saw the prime minister of Egypt talking to President Trump. He every time he talks to him, he's like, "Hey, put your foot down on these necks of these Ethiopians." And President Trump really doesn't want to get involved in that. Now, and that's the situation. Egypt constantly is trying to. If you had a weak Ethiopia or the leader of Ethiopia was weak, do you think they would have that down? You need a strong man like Abiy Ahmed to get things through. This is how things have historically happened. So even when Africa sees a competent, capable leader, they get a bad leader and then they'll mock him, and then they get a good leader and they'll call him a warlord. Like, you got to pick your poison, right? And it's like at a certain point, the African has to ask himself, and this is the world over, not just on the continent. It's including my subgroup, the African Americans. We have to ask ourselves at one time: do we want to win, or do we want to have good excuses for losing? So I love to hear your thoughts. Comment below, like, share, subscribe if you enjoy the content. Until the next time, take care. Bantu up.